said, my name's Nicholas and I'm one of the funding officers at the National Lottery Community Fund, and I look after Barnet and Camden. And as Deborah said, I about a year and a half ago became the funding officer for Barnet. So I'm still learning quite a lot about Barnet at the moment, and obviously because of the pandemic, I've not been able to spend much time there, unfortunately, but hopefully, very hopefully, things will start to improve and I'll be able to be more kind of available within the community. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run through our funding, an overview of our funding. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so a little bit about us if you don't know. So the National Lottery Community Fund, so we distribute around 600 million a year to communities across the UK, and this money is raised by the National Lottery players. And since June 2004, we've made over 200,000 grants and awarded over 9 billion to projects that have benefited millions of people. If we can move on. So, in order to support communities to thrive, we continue to support organisations that build strong relationships in and across communities, improve the places and spaces that matter to communities, and help more people to reach their potential by supporting them at the earliest possible stage. Those are our kind of key priorities. So that's quite broad, and I think lots of things can fit within that. If we can move on to the next slide. So key to this is something what we call people in the lead. So if you could just open up all the slides, sorry, it's got animation on it there, so it's a little bit difficult if I've not got control over it. So yeah, if you could just open everything up, that'd be great. So people in the lead, what does that mean? Well, I hope that this presentation will be shared with you and you'll see that there is a link at the bottom that you can follow, and that will take you to a short video that will kind of talk to you about what we mean by people in the lead. But what we kind of mean is that we want to ensure the people you work with are involved meaningfully in the development, design and delivery of whatever the work is that you're doing. And that you support people and communities to build on the knowledge and skills that they already have to make the changes that they want. And that you are well connected, that you can demonstrate a good understanding of other activities and services in the community and can show how the project will complement these. I think a good way to maybe think about this is that it's not about someone just coming up with an idea and saying, I think this is what the community need, go ahead and do it. And actually it's not what the community need. It's really about engaging with the community and finding out what it is that's really important to them and what they would like to see. We could move on. So effectively, we've kind of broken it down into three kind of categories, our funding: simple, standard, and partnership. So simple is our Awards for All program. I'm not going to say too much about Awards for All because I don't actually look after Awards for All. We just look after reaching communities and partnerships. But effectively, Awards for All is for grants up to 10,000 for 1 year. And it's kind of funding for one-off activity and testing new ideas. And this is kind of used quite a lot by smaller grassroots organizations or larger organizations as well. And Awards for All is kind of about 90% of our funding is for Awards for All. Our standard product is reaching communities. So this is longer term funding. And this is it's a flexible product, and it's for funding from £10,000 and upwards for up to 5 years. And that's a kind of funding that I kind of am involved in as the funding officer, and along with partnerships. So partnerships is very similar to reaching communities, but it's about more than one organisation coming together and working together to be more effective with the work that they do. Again, this is longer term funding, again, from £10,000 upwards and for up to 5 years. We could move on. So we like to see ourselves as a responsive funder. As I said, our funding can be used for a variety of different things. We can fund project activities, we can fund organisational development, we can support organisations to work together, we can support piloting new ways of working, and we can also fund core, fixed costs and capital costs. So with our flexibility, it's about whether you need longer or short-term funding, whether your request is particularly for an activity or to create more fundamental change. And it can be to fund single organisations or bringing organisations together. What isn't on here, and I'd like to just sort of add it in, and it's kind of information is on there on our website as well, is part of us being a responsive and flexible funder. We're very keen to still be supporting organisations who are responding to the current crisis that we're in. So if you need shorter term, maybe some funding for 6 months to continue to support beneficiaries who are being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, we can still look at those. That's very much what we were doing up until December of this year. It was very much emergency funding, distributing government funding to support activities, to support communities impacted by COVID-19. And that is still ongoing, and that would be part of our Reaching Communities offer as well. If we could move on. So just a quick thing about eligibility. Who can apply to us? You can apply to us if you're a voluntary or community organisation, a registered charity, a constituted group or club, or a not-for-profit company or community interest company, so known as a CIC. We can't accept applications from individuals or sole traders, companies that pay profits to directors, shareholders and members, organisations based outside the UK, organisations that don't have at least 2 trustees who aren't married, in a civil partnership, long-term relationship, living at the same address or related by blood, and we cannot support organisations applying on behalf of another. So, what we're looking for is that basically we used to have quite a onerous application form, which we got rid of a couple of years ago. And now we're just asking people for more kind of an expression of interest. So we're going to ask you for some information at the beginning online. It's more about what does your organisation do? What type of organisation are you? How much do you want and what the money is for? This doesn't have to be a full project budget. It can just be kind of giving us an idea how much you want and what it will be used for. We will ask you later for more information around that if we decide to invite you to the next stage. We want a little bit more information on project location, postcodes, areas to be covered, and declaration information. That's kind of including information around safeguarding. We have introduced a few new questions to the online form. If any of you are aware of our older process, we're kind of asking for information about the number of staff and volunteers, also what percentage of lived experience there is from the kind of people that work in the organisation. We will be asking for a main and senior contact at the beginning, and what groups of people will benefit from the project. That's what you'll be asked for if you make an initial expression of interest. So, tips for success. These are some things to kind of think about when you are going to submit, or before you're going to submit an expression of interest, so that you've developed your idea and you've been involving with the involvement of people who will benefit. You'll support what's already working well. You can test new approaches. You understand the existing activities and services that do similar work, that you're committed to equalities and the environment. You understand the impact your project will have for the community during the pandemic. We move on to the next slide. How well does this project demonstrate putting people in the lead? We're very keen to hear about that. How does this project fit in with local funding priorities? Is this activity accessible to all sections of the community? And is this additional to anything which should be provided as a statutory obligation of the government? Or does this duplicate any existing activity or service? These are all things to think about. And again, these slides will be shared with you. And there is also information available on our website. So how to apply? So you can check, first of all, check your eligibility. Going back to what I kind of mentioned before, you can do this via our website, or you can speak to the local team. Then you can apply online using our online portal, or if that's not possible for you, or you need more support, that you might have kind of specific support needs, you can contact the local team. And if you need to
Nicholas, you've gone on mute. Nicholas, you've gone on mute. Hi, Nicholas.
Yeah, sorry, somebody muted me. I don't know who muted me. Where did we get to? How to apply. Can we go back one slide? Okay. So I don't know where we got to. Can someone, Deborah, can you just tell me where I was muted? You're on mute, Deborah.
Talking about extra help if you needed help accessing the online form.
Yeah, if accessing the online form is difficult for you, please do contact our local team. We'll give you the contact details at the end of this. So once you've applied, you may get a call or an email from a local funding officer just to clarify any details if they need to. And then what will happen is when we feel we've got sufficient information, we will give you an initial decision. At that initial decision, we will either ask you to the next stage, or at that time, we may say that it's not something that we can currently support. And you will get feedback as well as to the reasons why we don't feel that we can support your idea. We could move on. So if you are invited to the next stage, we will ask you for more information. We'll kind of ask you a little bit more detail about finance and budget, a bit more information about the project if we need to, and also the impact for beneficiaries. What I'd really kind of like to stress here is that we're trying to be proportionate about the amount of information we ask you. If you're not asking us for a huge sum of money, we're not going to ask you as much information. If you're going to be asking for kind of a higher amount of money over a longer period, we will want to know more information, but that'll be very much about, you might have provided information already, or if there's gaps, we will ask you for some more information on that. You may get a call, or you might be visited by a local funding officer just to understand your project a little bit more. I personally find it quite beneficial to go out and meet people. So you might get a visit or a call just to kind of get a little bit more information or a bit more understanding of the project, of your project, or what you want the funding for. Once we've gathered all that information and we feel it's ready to go for a final decision, it will go through to a final decision stage. And at that stage, you will either be awarded funding or you'll be unsuccessful. Again, you'd get feedback if you were unsuccessful. Okay, so who to contact? If you need to contact somebody from our team, specifically me, you can email London and the London and the South East team. As you can see, we are a very large region. So we're covering all London boroughs: Berkshire, Buckinghamshire, East Sussex, West Sussex, Hampshire, Isle of Wight, and the list goes on. You can see it all from there. So it is a large area, but yes, if you do need to contact us, you can contact us at that email address which is provided. And I think we can move on to the next slide, which is just any questions questions I think we're moving on to. We've just before we go to any questions, I just want to make something very clear, which I touched on. I think reaching communities in the past has been seen as something that was beyond the capabilities of many organizations, because we were asking for a lot of information and people had to do quite a lot of work with 2 application forms. We don't have application forms anymore. It's a more conversational approach. So whatever you submit, if we need more information, we will ask you for more information. We will ask questions. That we kind of adopt this more regional way of working, which means that there are local funding officers that you can speak to and talk to them about your ideas. So I would very much encourage people to think that we have changed quite a lot as an organization, and our processes are a lot simpler, and we are flexible. Our funding can be for smaller amounts of funding or larger amounts of funding. So if you have any questions, you're uncertain, just ask and we can kind of clarify things for you. So I think what we could move on to is questions. I've not been looking at the chat. Unfortunately, I find it very difficult to kind of present and look at questions at the same time. So Deborah, if you could kind of let me know what questions there are. What I'll say is I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. I don't know the answers to everything. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out and get back to you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Nicholas. And I just to be clear for anyone who missed it, we are going to be sharing the presentation, which will have the contact details on that Nicholas has just shared. So don't worry about scribbling everything down. There's quite a few questions. I'm going to try and keep it to the generic ones that largely everyone will benefit from an understanding. So the first question to ask is they wanted to understand, are there any priority groups that you are looking to fund at the moment? So is it BAME communities, etc.? Are there any particular groups, disability, that are priorities?
That's quite a difficult question. We don't have specific priorities as such. I think what you kind of saw at the beginning are kind of what our main priorities are building stronger relationships, places and spaces, and I've forgotten the first one. shows how well that went.
Any particular communities.
We don't. I know other funders have quite specific priorities and criteria. We don't have them. We will be quite honest. If, for example, we are funding a number of organizations, for example, that might work with young people, we have to kind of think about our funding needs to be spread widely across many different communities. So no, there aren't any specific groups that we are targeting.
Okay, great. A second question is, are there any questions that they should focus more time on? So are there any particular questions that are more important within the application than others?
I would say not. I think just kind of making sure that you've covered those kind of tips and kind of looked at those kind of priorities and make sure quite clearly that you've involved the community.
Okay, great. The next one was, is there a time frame from submitting, is there an approximate time frame from when you submit your application to when you might get a result on whether you've been successful or not?
So what it does say on our website at the moment is that when you submit your initial idea, we will aim to get you a response within 12 weeks. Now, that might seem quite a long time, and it won't always be that long. So it's up to 12 weeks to get an initial decision. If you are invited to the full proposal stage, depending on how much information we require, I would say allow yourself a maximum of 6 months to apply to getting a final decision. Now that's a maximum, and it could be a lot less. It really depends how much you're asking for and how much information you provided and how much more information we need.
Okay, lovely. The next question was, are there examples of successful applicants that people can see so that they can get some guidance on the applications?
You wouldn't see people's applications. What you can see on our website, I'm not sure how often it's updated, it will tell you who we funded. It shows you what organisations we funded and a little bit of information about them. Obviously, we can't share people's applications, but you can see what kind of organisations have been funded.
Okay. The next question is when you talk about grassroots organisations, do you have to have a legal entity behind them? And I think this particularly relates to COVID mutual aid groups that have formed specifically in response to the COVID crisis.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to our eligibility. And I think it is something the fund is looking at, certainly around more mutual aid kind of support. So at the moment, you would have to fit into our eligibility criteria.
Okay. The next question is what is the role of the local National Lottery community representative in terms of how much support do they give to the smaller organisations to put in their applications?
Okay, obviously we can't help you write your applications, but we can sort of talk to you about what we need to see in applications, what's really helpful, and I think a lot of those points are covered off in the slide about the tips. As I said, I'm happy to have conversations with people. I'm happy to come and meet organisations and talk to them. But our role is really not to kind of support people writing their applications or too much support and advice.
Okay, lovely. Is if you currently have a National Lottery grant, can you apply for other grants within that are open within the lottery?
Yes, you can.
Yes.
Okay. There's a simple answer to that, yes.
Great.
So I mean, we do have organisations that have more than one Reaching Communities grant. People can hold awards for all, and they can also hold Reaching Communities. I'm not 100% sure about this, but I don't believe you can have 2 awards for all grants at the same time. But I would check the website on that. And also remember that we have got an advice line. You can always phone the advice line as well.
Okay. And on a similar vein, if you've been unsuccessful, is there a time limit before you can apply again?
No, there isn't. What we would say is that if you have been unsuccessful and been given feedback, that you've taken that feedback into consideration if you do reapply.
Okay, fine. I'm just going through it's been a lot of questions, just checking I haven't. Someone just wanted to say, which is the is the priority to return to funding more business as usual or COVID? Which is the prioritised stream at the moment?
There's no prioritised. We are looking at both. As I kind of said, we're very keen to still support organisations with that kind of funding around COVID-19, but we are also very aware that we need to keep supporting organisations more long term.
Okay. So the question here is do you have the option of applying for capital funding?
Yes, you do.
Okay, that's good. And is funding open all year round?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, yes, it is. We don't close.
You don't close. Okay, lovely. Oh, hang on, I've got 4 new messages. Sorry, bear with me. Can people apply for the Heritage Lottery funding and Reaching Communities in the same year?
Good question. Not 100% sure. I would say yes, you can. I don't.
Didn't get onto the game, but I tried. I think.
Okay, sorry. You might be hearing my son in the background. Apologies. He's on a maths lesson. It's the joys of home working.
Yeah.
I've got a question. Is it possible to apply without a bank account if you're a mutual aid group?
Well, you won't be able to apply if you're a mutual aid group.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I don't think you're eligible,
Fine.
Unfortunately, unless you do fit into that other criteria. So Okay, you said that we are a CIC. Yes, a CIC
Yeah.
can apply.
Okay.
No, but you would need a bank account because we'd have to pay the grant into a bank account.
Yeah. And then the next question is about if a charity mainly supports people from one religious group, is that a fundable project? Which is always a difficult one.
I mean, we'd like to see that our funding is accessible to everybody. It's a bit difficult without knowing more information about what the kind of more detail about the work and who the beneficiaries are. So I'm not really 100% sure how to answer that question.
Yeah, often, I mean, I know other funders talk about having open access. So even if predominantly a cohort is a particular religious group, it depends on, you know, if it's open access, but it would be each individual organisation, I guess, and how they're structured and how their program's set up that would be considered. So, okay. To get application to apply. Someone's just asking just a clarification on what are the different funding amounts through the different schemes. So we obviously have awards for all, which is up to 10,000, and then reaching communities. I know you said it in the presentation.
So reaching communities is anything over £10,000. So we fund, okay, what we can fund anything, any amount of money. However, if you request over £500,000, it's a much more, there's a lot more scrutiny, and it has to go to our England committee. So it's a much longer process.
Yeah. Okay. And I think this question is projects obviously have to be user-led. Where they have client groups that it's difficult for it to be user-led, and that obviously might be a disability, mental health issues. How does an organisation account for that?
Well, I think they just have to be quite honest with us and tell us the reasons why. I mean, not everyone has to be user-led. That's not an absolute prerequisite that you have to be a user-led organisation, but we'd like to see that there's some lived experience involved in organisations as well, and that even if it's not user-led, that you have consulted with the beneficiaries. Okay,
great. Okay. And I think, I mean, there's quite a few questions that are quite specific to organisations. So I think we've covered quite a breadth of questions within that. If anyone else has any questions that we haven't addressed, I'm happy for you to come off mute now. And if there's any questions I've missed, just raise your hand.
Yeah.
Who's that?
There's Danny Cooperberg here. Hi. Hi. You hear me? Hi. Well, we're in the era, an exceptional era of COVID, so that's clearly going to affect emergency and direct funding. So my question was, in this environment, obviously there's going to be a priority for COVID emergency relief, but what proportion of that is being prioritized as a result of the pandemic, and how much has that changed since last March?
Well, we don't specifically have anything prioritized for COVID. It's just part of our Reaching Communities offer to still keep supporting people with emergency funding.
Thank you.
Okay.
I have another question here that is the amount of funding you can apply for dependent on your charity income?
Well, okay. If you are an organisation who had an income of about, this is an example of maybe £10,000 last year, and you ask us for £500,000, there would be lots of scrutiny around your finances, about your ability to manage that amount of money. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. An example is we funded an organisation in Camden, relatively new organisation, quite small. They didn't have a huge income from the year before. However, we funded them for 150,000 because of the need for the work that they were doing, and they could demonstrate quite clearly the need for the work. But what we just did is make sure that there was quite a lot of support around grant management, and payments were made more frequently, just to make sure that everything was being spent properly.
And another question here is can you apply, obviously you have grant managers covering different areas. If someone wants to apply for a collaboration across a number of areas, can they do that, or should they just do applications for one local area at a time?
No, they could. We have organisations who are working across multiple boroughs in London, and we have a specific team who look after those kind of requests. They're called the cross-region. They're called the cross-region team. So if you're taking in quite a number of boroughs, yes, we can still look at people's applications. But what we'd want to know is that you really know that there is a need for that work in that borough, and that you've consulted with people.
Okay, fine. So key is, again, making sure people are in the lead and knowing that what the community needs and wants, rather than just assuming that if it works in one area, it might cover the other area as well. So again, it's putting people in the lead. Okay.
Very well put, Deborah.
Okay. Anyone I've missed who wants to come off mute and just ask their question? Hope, I can see Hope's got her hand up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nicholas. You said that you can fund partnership working. That is 2 organizations, 3 organizations wanting to come together. You can support them with funding. What if 3 organizations want to come together? There is a need for the funding to support the capacity building and stuff. And then they have a project. Would the National Lottery Community Fund or Reaching Community be able to do both? That is, supporting these organizations to merge or to work in partnership, at the same time funding the projects that they're working on?
Yeah, I think what you're asking is about the capacity building for the organizations working together. And then
the work that they want to do together.
Absolutely, and I think that was part of the presentation. It's like, yes, we can fund capacity building. We used to have, as part of Reaching Communities, we had something called Building Capabilities, which was an additional lump of funding that was added to the original request to support capacity building. So it's something that we're very keen to support, capacity building.
Okay.
And we can fund project activities at the same time, as well as funding capital if we need to. So it's very flexible about what we can support.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay, it looks like we've had a lot of questions and quite detailed questions, which is great. I'd like to thank Nicholas for his time today. I think it's been really helpful to a lot of you to understand a little bit better the lottery funding, or what type of things can be funded, and the way in which you apply and go through the methods. So thank you, Nicholas, really appreciated. And we have captured the chat as well, and we have recorded this. So after the meeting, we will post it for you so that you can re-watch it and see the answers to the questions, as well as sharing Nicholas's presentation with you. And Nicholas, is there anything you wanted to add in wrap up from your section?
No, I would just sort of say, if you do need to ask anything, I am available, so please ask me. And I just kind of encourage people to think of Reaching Communities as something that has changed, that it's not just for larger organisations, and it's not just for large sums and longer period of funding. And going back to it's still there as well for emergency funding because of the current situation that we're in.
Lovely, thank you. Pete, if you can share the next bit of the presentation. Pete? I think what we wanted to do, and again, our thanks to Nicholas, is just remind you, both myself and also Ellen Cheshire, who works for Barnet Together, which is a collaboration across Barnet of organisations supporting charities and organisations. So we wanted just to remind you of the fundraising offer that is available, and that's free support to help you access things like the National Lottery. So that is helping you make a funding application, as well as discussing the different ways you might approach fundraising. So sometimes, like, you know, one fund might not be suitable, but we can help point you in a different direction. We've got a number of how-to guides as well that you can access. If you have also a specific project, we share funding opportunities with you. So if you come to us and let us know what your project's about, and you know, if it's capital funding, etc., you know, just ask us and we'll help identify opportunities for you. And really importantly is we also help provide training. Both Ellen and I are available across all Barnet organisations. I look after the children's and young people's organisations, and Ellen looks after largely adult, but again across all organisations, to help provide you with the skills to improve your fundraising within your organisation via one-to-one support. So please take advantage of that. Pete, if you just roll on a little bit. Next slide, if you can, Pete. Again, so use Ellen and I, we're both here and our details will be circulated. A couple of key funds as well that I just want to highlight to you, that are local funds that are available. There is a training and development fund, Space to Grow, that's just launched to help your organisation develop skills. And that could be in safeguarding, it could be in fundraising skills, etc. So that's just launched. You've also got the Barnet Community Innovation Fund, which is largely focused at adults, but it is for new projects within the Barnet community, and that's different levels of grants, 2,000, 10,000 and 65,000. Community Barnet are just launching, and I think the seminars are this week, a fund with the community fund in conjunction with the National Lottery, which is another fund for Barnet charities. So again, look at that. They've got seminars running this week that you can access. And Near Neighbours have got a COVID grant for small projects running in the next 6 to 8 weeks for up to £4,000. And all of those funds can be supported by Ellen and myself, and there's seminars going on and Elizabeth from Near Neighbours as well. And there's different seminars going on to allow you to access those funds. So please look for those. In addition, the Barnet Community Response Fund launched this morning as well, and that is COVID-specific projects. So please look out for those funds that have just launched, in addition to the National Lottery. We do highlight on our funding newsletters all the different funds, including Awards for All, Reaching Communities. We just had the Community Isolation Fund that went out. So that will be highlighted to you as and when they open. And Pete, next slide. Yeah, lastly, just do remember Barnet Together, which is Young Barnet Foundation for Children and Young People, Volunteering Barnet, which allows your organisation to access volunteers for projects. So if you need that, again, come to us, and Inclusion Barnet with Ellen on the call. We're here to support you with capacity building, fundraising opportunities, and building partnerships. So we're here to support you. And again, just thank you to Nicholas for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And hopefully, if you need any support, you'll contact Nicholas, but also come to Ellen and myself. And that's the close of the meeting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Nicholas. Really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.